So today I want to talk about something that happened 72 hours ago that fundamentally changes the entire strategic calculus of this war. And what I am about to tell you is based on leaked diplomatic communications that multiple sources have now confirmed. China delivered an ultimatum to the United States. The message was direct, unambiguous, and absolutely devastating to American strategy. If you escalate military operations against Iran beyond current levels, if you attempt a ground invasion, if you target Iranian leadership or critical civilian infrastructure, China will respond with concrete measures that will make the continuation of this war economically unsustainable for the United States. Let me walk you through exactly what happened, what this ultimatum means, and why this represents the single most significant shift in this conflict since it began. Because what China just did is not diplomacy. What China just did is draw a red line that America cannot cross without risking a confrontation with China itself. And that changes everything. So let me start with the facts as we know them. 72 hours ago, the Chinese Foreign Ministry summoned the U.S. ambassador to China for an emergency meeting. This meeting was not announced publicly until after it happened. The Chinese Vice Foreign Minister delivered a formal message to the ambassador. That message was then transmitted to the White House, to the State Department, and to the Pentagon within hours. And according to sources familiar with the communication, the message contained 3 specific warnings. First, China stated that it considers Iran a strategic partner whose sovereignty and territorial integrity are of vital interest to Chinese national security. This is diplomatic language, but what it actually means is very clear. China is saying that an American invasion of Iran would be treated by China as a threat to Chinese security, not just Iranian security. Chinese security. Second, China warned that if America escalates beyond current military operations, China will implement immediate economic countermeasures. China did not specify exactly what those countermeasures would be, but the implication is obvious. China could stop buying U.S. Treasury bonds. China could dump existing Treasury holdings. China could restrict exports of critical materials to the United States. China could sanction American companies operating in China. All of these options are on the table. Third, and this is the most significant, China stated that it would provide Iran with comprehensive support to resist any American invasion. This includes, but is not limited to, intelligence sharing, weapons systems, economic assistance, and diplomatic backing. China is telling America, if you invade Iran, you will not just be fighting Iran. You will be fighting Iran backed by the full weight of Chinese strategic support. Now let me explain why this ultimatum is so devastating to American strategy. Because what China just did is eliminate America's most powerful option for ending this war quickly. The Pentagon has been planning for months for a potential ground invasion scenario. The idea was that if diplomatic pressure failed, if airstrikes proved insufficient, America could launch a ground invasion to seize control of the Strait of Hormuz by force, remove the Iranian government, and install a regime friendly to American interests. This strategy was always risky. It would be enormously expensive. American casualties would be high. The regional backlash would be severe, but it was on the table as an option, the ultimate escalation. The thing America could do if all else failed, and now China has taken that option off the table. Because if China is serious about its ultimatum, and I believe China absolutely is serious, then an American invasion of Iran triggers a confrontation with China that America is not prepared for. Think about what this means practically. America cannot afford a simultaneous conflict with Iran and economic warfare with China. The American economy depends on Chinese manufacturing. The American government depends on Chinese purchases of treasury bonds to finance its debt. American companies depend on access to Chinese markets. If China implements the economic countermeasures it is threatening, the American economy goes into immediate recession, possibly depression. So America is now trapped. America cannot escalate militarily without triggering Chinese economic retaliation that would be catastrophic. But America also cannot continue the current level of operations indefinitely because the costs are unsustainable and Iran is not weakening. And America cannot negotiate on Iran's terms without admitting strategic defeat. Every option is bad, and China just made them all worse. Now let me talk about why China delivered this ultimatum now. Because timing is everything in geopolitics. And China chose this exact moment for very specific reasons. First, China has been watching American military operations carefully for weeks, and China has concluded that America is losing. Not in the sense of battlefield defeats, but in the sense that American strategy is not achieving its objectives. Hormuz is still closed. Iran is still fighting. American allies are suffering economically. And there is no end in sight. China sees an opportunity. If China can prevent American escalation now, China locks in a strategic victory. Iran survives. Hormuz remains under Iranian control. The petrodollar continues eroding. American credibility continues declining. And China emerges as the power that protected its partner against American aggression. This is a massive geopolitical win for China. Second, China is sending a message to every nation in the world that is watching this conflict. The message is simple. American military dominance is no longer absolute. If you align with China, China will protect you even against American military power. This is a direct challenge to the foundation of American global leadership. For 75 years, the implicit deal was that if you align with America, America will protect you. China is now offering the inverse. Align with China, and China will protect you from America. Third, China is testing American resolve. China wants to know if America will back down when confronted with a credible threat of Chinese retaliation. If America backs down, China gains confidence and will push harder in future confrontations over Taiwan, the South China Sea, and other flashpoints. If America does not back down, China gets to see exactly how far America is willing to go and what price America is willing to pay. Either outcome gives China valuable information. Now let me address what I know many people are wondering. Is China bluffing? Would China really follow through on these threats? And my assessment, based on analyzing Chinese strategic behavior over the past 2 decades, is that China is absolutely not bluffing. China has been preparing for this confrontation for years. China has reduced its holdings of U.S. Treasury bonds gradually over the past decade. China has been building alternative supply chains to reduce dependence on American technology. China has been strengthening its financial system to withstand American sanctions. All of this preparation was designed for exactly this moment. When China delivers an ultimatum this explicit, China is prepared to follow through. Because if China backs down, if China makes threats and does not enforce them, China loses all credibility. Every future Chinese threat becomes meaningless. China knows this, which means China has already made the decision that defending Iran is worth the cost of economic confrontation with America. And here's the crucial point. China believes it can win that confrontation. China's economy is the world's largest by purchasing power parity. China is America's largest trading partner. China holds over $1 trillion in U.S. debt. China manufactures the majority of goods Americans consume. In an economic war between the United States and China, both sides lose. But China believes America loses more. And China might be right. Now let me talk about how the White House is responding to this ultimatum, because the response tells you everything about how seriously America is taking this threat. According to sources, there have been emergency meetings between the President, the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Defense, the National Security Advisor, and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The discussions have been intense and the opinions divided. One faction, primarily military and intelligence officials, is arguing that China is bluffing and that America should call that bluff by proceeding with invasion planning. This faction believes that China will not actually risk economic catastrophe over Iran and that Chinese threats are designed purely to deter without intention to follow through. Another faction, primarily economic advisors and some State Department officials, is arguing that China is deadly serious and that escalating against Iran would be strategic suicide. This faction believes that Chinese economic retaliation would devastate the American economy and that America has no good options for responding. And caught in the middle is the president, who has to make a decision that will define his entire foreign policy legacy. Escalate and risk economic war with China, or back down and admit that American military power has limits. Neither option is politically acceptable. Subscribe for more analysis on how China's ultimatum just changed the power balance in this conflict, and what America's response will reveal explained clearly. And tell me in the comments, do you think China is bluffing, or will China actually follow through on these threats? I will see you next time. Let me leave you with one final observation. The fact that China felt confident enough to deliver this ultimatum publicly through official diplomatic channels tells you everything about how much the global balance of power has shifted. 10 years ago, China would not have dared to threaten the United States this explicitly. 20 years ago, it would have been unthinkable. But today, China believes it has the economic leverage and the strategic position to challenge American military action directly. And China is willing to stake its credibility on that belief. This is not the world of American unipolarity anymore. This is not the world where America could invade Iraq or Libya or Afghanistan without any great power pushing back. This is a new world where China is willing and able to draw red lines that America cannot cross without catastrophic consequences. And the sooner American policymakers accept this new reality, the sooner they can start making decisions based on what is actually possible rather than what was possible 20 years ago. The blockade China just broke is not a physical blockade. It is the strategic blockade of American options. America thought it had the option to escalate militarily whenever it chose. China just removed that option. And without that option, America has to fundamentally rethink its entire strategy in this conflict. That rethinking will be painful, but it is necessary. Because the alternative is stumbling into a confrontation with China that America is not prepared to win.